What's up? Hello, everyone. It's crazy. My life is just always folding back in on itself. Today I was entering all these names of incoming ninth graders at this high school I'm working at that used to be my old high school and was my daughter's high school and is a high school I've taught at, and that I'm now working behind an administration desk of it. Picture of my daughter in her senior class hangs on one wall near where I am. Crazy. But I was realizing, I know all the last names of all these kids that come from farther east of here because my book about the Sandia Mountains. I'm like, I bet they're related to so-and-so. Like, can you be like too connected to a place and too aware of everybody and everything? I think Nietzsche thought so. The subsequent history of Germany seemed to bear him out a bit. This is what they call a Mormon cricket, these giant locusts. So crazy. Grasshoppers' DNA changes and they change into locusts. That's nuts. And it's become pure hunger. What a metaphor. What a useful metaphor. I think it's how people with lots of money are. Something shifts over and they become just beings operating on just pure greed, just devouring. But I have seen areas of southern Utah before that were just crawling with these things, just like roads just glistening with them, covering the barks of trees. Anyway, lots of early Mormon lore / history stories from Utah are about they have a story about the seagulls and the locusts. Like the seagulls just descended and ate all the bugs that were eating the crops. So I've had this since living in Utah a long time ago. Worked on an independent movie there as production coordinator. Don't know if I'll ever get into that. Who knows? When even was that? Circa 2003, 2004. There's another Tonke brick. I could go off. Watch the PG Woodhouse video to hear me really go off on this. If you care, there's Tonke bricks throughout this house. I've seen them for sale online for $40, $60 before, but mine were all found. This might have been one of my recent acquisitions. Well, it's still like 10 years ago, but I knew there was this one sidewalk that had some Tonke bricks in it. I'm like a scholar of La Madera Road at the north end of the Sandias, and I've explored it for much of my life. And the Tonke brick factory is up there in Tonke Pueblo that the brick factory was built atop. And I knew there was this one sidewalk in town that had bricks from it in it. And I saw that it was being torn up for this art project, this Albuquerque Rapid Transit bus project. It turned out to be this big corrupt thing. Like the mayor at the time, Richard Berry, had the same contractors paid 3 times to rip sections up and repave it. I mean, there was a ton of scandal. And I saw other stuff that never even made the news around town that was similar. It's good old-fashioned grift. But I was happy to get some more bricks when that happened, though I was sad to see that sidewalk being torn up. I don't think that was a smart move, ripping up historic Route 66 all through Albuquerque with all its medians and trees. A lot of character was lost. They should have done Lomas. Lomas is kind of a crappy street. It's just all car dealerships. I mean, Lomas is all right. It means hills. It's kind of a pieced together long street across the town. In 1952, they redid a lot of the streets in Albuquerque, and that's when they assigned a quadrant, like a number, like NE, SE, SW, NW, to one of the 4 parts of town. Anyway, and they put Lomas together from a few smaller roads at that time. Anyway, not a book, but it was on the shelf. I could go off about Tonke. I could give a 10-hour lecture on Tonke and related subjects. Maybe someday I will. When I get over to the New Mexico shelf. And those 3 Tonke bricks on there, I'll just go off for 2 hours. These are books about sci-fi. But I feel like it must be symbolic to be back at my old high school. It's like purgatory or something. I'm like doing penance or something. Like, is that really the takeaway? I don't know. Does it symbolize adolescence? Does it symbolize a return to some more inner self? Do you ever think, my life is too layered? If this was in a book, I'd be like, why? There's a lot of connective tissue here. It's maybe unbelievable. This is an interesting book just on the history of sci-fi. Kind of a cool, elegant, simple design for the book, too. This is a classic of its kind. And sci-fi really does have interesting origins. Sci-fi's been around, for a while. I mean, you could argue that Candide has a sci-fi element in it. At one point, they build mechanical spiders and cross a mountain range. There's, fanciful robotic inventions in Greek myths. There's an ancient Roman book about what life on other planets might be like. And there's a YouTube video about that. That's where I learned about it. Look it up. But I'd say, kind of began with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I don't know if I own a copy of it at the moment. At one point at a school, I picked up 50 copies of it for my daughter Anodyne, who wallpapered the inside of her vehicle with it and her room. And she loves Mary Shelley, and what a goth she was. Mary Shelley, who carried around her husband's desiccated heart. Ha ha ha. And, made up Frankenstein on a whim. Really, created a genre in a way. And that's a very literary work. It's not subliterary for, having a scientific premise. If anything, it enters the realm of the myth. And Prometheus is literally referenced in the subtitle, right? Prometheus Unbound. But yeah, I'd be curious to reread this because this is not fresh in my mind at all. When I think about the origins of sci-fi, I think about the fanzine scene of the 70s and these mimeographed newsletters being sent around people that liked these or that books. And I don't know, yeah, this is due for a reread. I love books like this. I love big picture stuff. Jim Rugg started this really interesting comic series called Grand Design, where he takes these Marvel characters and tells their whole long stories from the perspective of the Watcher, this character that can see all time, like a cosmic being. But I love that idea, especially when you think about how long and messy and crazy a comic run might be for a superhero. My friend Doug has read basically all of the Avengers since the 70s. I mean, that's crazy. He has them in these bound collections, which says to me that he's not some object fetishizing snob. He loves the story. He loves the art. He's the same way with his DVDs. He had the best DVD collection of anyone I've ever known, and he threw out all the cases and just keeps the DVDs in a book. And he's like, for space, it makes sense. And I have them to watch the movies. I'm like, I know, but I don't know. I guess I love physical media a lot. It kind of pains me. I've not read these two, but what a strange premise. Transformations, Understanding World History Through Science Fiction. Kind of love it. Stories by Bradbury, Asimov, Harlan Ellison. These intrigue me. I think I got these at Coas Books in Las Cruces. I love their paperback sections. That is just one of the best bookstores ever. It's the Strand of New Mexico, but there's actually places to sit and you won't get trampled. Oh, that's interesting. You could teach history using these stories. What does it look like inside? The binding on this is so bad, I just discovered. Okay, so this is like a school book, kind of. Exploration and Discovery, a quote. Oh, and then it has a story that illustrates it and comes. I'm going to love this. Oh, I see this. The one, Transformations 2 is American history and Transformations is world history. That is so cool. This book, I love a book like this. And it's got some far out sci-fi pre-AI painting. Mammoth Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. Some ugly sticker stuff, but it's a really nice, plasticized, protected cover. It's important to remember, nothing should be really wholly nice. It's got to be shabby in some ways. Oh, it's understandable, actually. It was a library book. Look at that, October 11th, 2001. 1 month after 9/11. How did this library deal with how they were feeling at that time? They decided to get rid of this book. Give it to me. Maybe they had a moment of sober realism and science fiction seemed distasteful to them. It's got a zip code with 9 in it. Let's see. Oh, it's Orange County. This is from California. So New York was a continent removed, but still, TV and science fiction viewing devices made it all one place at that time in America. I've just read a lot of selections from this book. Oh, yeah, this is cool. If I talk about any of the individual authors, I should look them up in here, like H.G. Wells. And I think I will. Lester Del Rey. An important figure as a publisher and editor, as well as a writer. I'll always love Del Rey paperbacks for bringing back the Oz books in the 80s and doing such beautiful reprints with great covers of those, particularly all the original bound ones. Really could care less about the ones beyond it as anything beyond a curiosity. Though right in the first Ruth Plumly Thompson one, she gives the Scarecrow like totally different backstory. She said that the pole that held the Scarecrow up in the field was actually like a conduit to this throne in an underground world where the Scarecrow had been a king and his personality had transferred through it. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Lester Del Rey is probably the outstanding expert on every phase of science fiction writing, editing, and criticism that there lives in the world today. Isaac Asimov. 1926 to 1976, The History of a Subculture. If I read this, I don't remember it, but I sure want to read it. I think I'm blurry on this topic because I've read a lot about science fiction, and I'm like, what have I read and what haven't I read? Science fiction as we know it today began in 1926 when Hugo Gernsback, an eccentric writer and inventor, decided the time was right for a magazine filled with what he called scientification. Well, this one I did read. I remember spending some time with it and liking it. The Dreams Our Stuff is Made Of. How Science Fiction Conquered the World. By Thomas M. Dish. Sounds like it. Yeah, it makes like big statements about its influence. Sure. I don't doubt it. This book looks alright. It's kind of cool. Love Metropolis. I think that's from that. Thought it was. I think both those panels are. Cover photographs. That's not much help. Brilliant. A wonderful book, and no one who cares about science fiction or about American culture should miss reading it. This is by a sci-fi novelist. He did a novelization of the show The Prisoner. I think I read it, actually. I had it for a while. Sci-fi is weird because sometimes something that's like literally a novelization or a description or a spin-off from some movie or thing will become kind of a thing of its own. Like I've heard some sci-fi people praise like Star Wars novels before. And I know when Disney bought that, it disappointed a lot of people because they dissolved, officially anyway, the canon that had existed before in the books of all that stuff. I'm like a casual Star Wars fan. I've enjoyed some of those movies. And anyone that builds a world, I think that's cool. To have one that successful that everyone wants to play in, and it shaped movies, etc. so much, that's wild. I've liked some of the newer movies here and there. And then I kind of stopped keeping up. Anyway, yeah, sci-fi is interesting. And it is, I think it asks a lot of big things. I think maybe it's one of the only branches of literature where like really big philosophical questions are still getting asked. Like, I think they are in mainstream literature too, and literary literature, but they're more like emotional usually. Sci-fi asks kind of different questions, big questions about our context and meaning. And I appreciate it for that. It is literary and literature. It's just a different flavor, genre, lane. A lot of like early sci-fi began with just people writing into these fanzines about what sci-fi there was, the books and stuff they liked, and these communities built up, and they published short pieces in them. But I don't know, because I haven't read this one. But look at it, isn't it cool looking? Like, where do I even get this stuff? Volume 1, 1926 to 1935. Okay, so these magazines were like kind of earlier than I thought. Yeah, learning's kind of pointless because you just forget everything. That's the lesson for today, kids. 1974. Name any leading science fiction writer of today, and the likelihood is that he made his debut in science fiction magazine. Yeah, look, they didn't even proffer one female writer. But there were no doubt good ones writing at that time. Like, Le Guin had probably gotten going already. I bet Shirley Jackson never wrote any sci-fi, but I wish she had. Oh, I bet this book is cool. I love learning about this kind of stuff. Wow, look at this bookmark that was in here. B. Dalton invites you to read the 1980 American Book Awards winners. Wow. B. Dalton was also the name of a bookstore I was trying to think of. I knew there was this other mall bookstore. It was B. Dalton and Walden Books. I remember them both. This is amazing, actually. The National Medal for Literature, Eudora Welty, for excellent of her past continuing contribution in literature. I'm not seeing this. Let's see here. Dang it. Wow. Everything becomes ephemera and amazing. Wow. This bookmark is 1 year younger than me. Anyone making helpful bookmarks like these days? Listing great book things. I almost missed out on Sleepy Squirrel. Nice squirrel. Oh, that's so nice. Thanks. Oh yeah. What's up, kitty? Relaxing. Chilling. So pretty. Wow, Mike, that's a great place for all that. I like how it's out of the way and impossible to read the spines of the lowest stuff. Yeah, and it's real dark, too, and it's good. So a cat might leap out and attack you. Because there's a little kitty spot. 5 stars. I literally, grew up with this couch around when I was a little kid. It's been reupholstered a couple times. But my little then brother and I used to call this the cartoon couch because we always watched Saturday morning cartoons on it in the 80s. And it still exists. It had 5 lives in between them. My mom spent much of her final years on this couch. She could never get warm, weirdly. Maybe thyroid related. It's weird to think about. This couch was in a loft in Colorado in the 80s. Now it's here. One time I cleaned out behind the cushions and I found old BMG stamps from the BMG Music Club from the 80s and 90s. And I found a really, really old movie ticket. That one right there. Pretty sure that's from Bayfield or Durango, Colorado in the early 90s. Was I recording? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's from Bayfield, Colorado, or Durango, Colorado in the early 90s. Does working at one's old high school symbolize being stuck in adolescence some way after a divorce that kind of sucked? Is talking about science fiction relevant to all this? Is it also symbolic of stasis and adolescence? But why? Mary Shelley was 19 when she wrote Frankenstein. But sci-fi is very much something that's also looking forward about the future and so on. You gotta be a dreamer to make impossible things happen. You gotta dream it first. This has been the sci-fi books. And a few books about sci-fi. But I am going to do a few videos on individual sci-fi authors. In this case, probably. And that's a lot of Zelazny. I feel like that deserves a mention. Of course, nothing deserves anything. All we are is dust in the wind. Who wrote that? Copyright me. Don't write a song or anything about it and say you thought of it first. Dust in the wind. No, just kidding. But sometimes I marvel and shake my head at the dark stuff that gets into mainstream pop songs. I'm like, whoa. Does the world need that? Well, you gave it to him. Like Jack and Diane from John Mellencamp. Dang. Life goes on long after the thrill of living is gone. And the 80s teens are all dancing. Woo. The channel passed 300 subscribers today. What? It's pretty cool. I still haven't used my social media or anything to promote it. Maybe I'll do that sometime. And I haven't resorted to YouTube Shorts or anything like that yet. I was thinking I'd get to that stuff eventually, maybe in some way. Anyway, thank you all for subscribing and watching and stuff and commenting. It's so cool. Makes me happy every time I read something that someone wrote. It's just always gratifying, whatever you create in your life, to get good feedback, you know? Like, I find, like, even if I'm doing simple, like, office work or something like that, if like work is barely acknowledged, not like I'm desperate for approval or anything and I'm cool with whatever, but it's just a much, like, you just feel like your work matters if people are like, thank you, I needed that, you know? Cats really have to have the blinds partly open so they can look out, but when I was a kid, I read this Three Investigators book where they're camping out in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and they wake up in the middle of the night and somebody's looking in one of the windows. That's been a creepy image for me my whole life because of that book. And also, you know, I've had people do that a few times in my life, where you wake up and even if it's a friend at your window in the middle of the night, what's up, squirrel? How you doing? I wrote a New Mexico news item once from a Clovis, New Mexico police report, and it was like a woman woke up in the middle of the night, saw a hand reaching in her open window, screamed, then the hand withdrew. That was the whole story. I'm like, that's enough. That's a good story. Squirrel, you and your mother neglect your grooming a lot. It's true. Such a mysterious photograph. I lived that photograph. I was standing right next to that guy when he was gesturing to that grave. Maybe it's a bad sign to have someone gesturing to a gravestone on the way out the door. Maybe it's just a realistic sentiment. Go. That guy has since died, of course. This is from 2001. You move too much when the camera's in your face. Just let it. Okay. All right, I'm hungry. Good night, everybody. Take care. Thanks for being out there.